hard work is the goal. It's just to work hard. That is my goal.
And then die?
On things worth doing. When no one's watching, I work harder than when they're watching. And thinking about it like that has given me this persistent and ever-present scorecard or third party that's like, no one's watching, which means now you have to work because otherwise you're full of shit. And so it's this continuous reinforcing cycle of the me and other me holding the whip behind me to see how much I can take. But with each lash of the whip that I take, learning that I can take it and continue to trudge on. And so as long as you keep going, you bear witness to yourself of what you are capable of. If you had to create a human, what would you put them through to make them tough? It probably wouldn't be a really chill life.
Yeah.
What would you put them through to make them patient? Well, you probably wouldn't give them things immediately. And so it's like we want these traits, but each of the traits has a price tag attached to it. And it's just like, do you want to pay the price tag to get the thing? And so I think if people reframed the period of life that they're going through as the price that they're paying out of their wallet, but the wallet is their time, it's the seconds of life that they're trading for it, then I think more people will be willing to make the trade. Because at least when I look at myself, like when I'm 80 something years old and I'm looking back on my life, I want to have these traits. But in order to have those traits, I know I have to go through these things. And I think for me, that's given me a lot of comfort in hard times. Hard work is the goal. And so it's not like work hard so that X. Because as soon as you have a so that, then the X is the thing. But if the goal is to work as hard as you possibly can, then the only real output we have is who we become along the way. Then it's something that I can win or measure myself against every day in real time throughout the day, which is how hard am I working? Because that is the goal. Because I know that when I look back on my life, the days that I loved the most were days when I had nothing left in the tank. And so then the goal becomes to empty the tank, not where I drive, but just to drive the car as hard as I possibly can. And that means that in the beginning, it's just straightaways and just seeing how high I can rev the engine. But as I become more advanced, it's like, all right, well, now we've got turns, and then it's turns in elevation, and then it's turns in elevation without guardrails because we have risk. And so when I think about how hard I want to work, the interesting thing about that is that the only person who can judge you on your success is you, because you're the only one who knows how much left in the tank you really had. I think a lot of entrepreneurship and even personal growth is training yourself on how you respond to hard. Because in the early days, hard was, ooh, stop. This isn't good. This is a warning sign. This is a red flag. I should slow down, or I should stop, I should pivot. But the more I think about it as a competitive landscape, as I'm clear on what this path is supposed to look like, and these rocks and these dragons are things that I'm going to have to slay along the way to get the princess or get the treasure, I get happier about the harder it is because I know that no one else will follow.
It's a selection effect.
And I think if you can shift from this is hard to no one else will be able to do this, then it flips from being this thing that you're like, oh, poor me, to oh, poor everyone else who's going to have to try.
Yeah.
And I think that is so much more motivating as a frame for the exact same circumstance. People only root for people who don't need it. Like the amount of times when I was on my lonely path where I was too different from the friends that I had, but not successful enough to be friends with the people that I wanted to be friends with. That's when you want people to root for you. That's when you want people to support you. Once you've already won, people are like, he's amazing, he's so good. But like, that's the time when you need it the least. And so you always have to be the person who roots for you before everyone else does. And it's usually a single clap in the auditorium for a very long period of time. It is a slow clap that's just you rooting for you. People struggle to do things alone. And the path of the exceptional person is one of an exception, which means that you are not with other people. And rather than fighting that or bemoaning it, see it as an indicator that you're on the right path. Because if everyone else were cheering you on, then it means you're not in the right place, because it means you're just like everyone else, and that's not where you want to be. There's this huge time delay between when we start behaving in a way that a winner behaves and when we start winning. And the problem is that the bigger the mountain you're trying to climb, the bigger the W you're trying to get, typically the more delayed it is.
Longer the lag.
Yeah, between when you start behaving like a winner and when you start being a winner. And most people don't get the fast enough feedback loop to know that they're on the right path when they are taking these first steps in the right direction, because they have this really big goal, but they forget that with that really big goal comes the even longer delay that it takes to get there, while still continuing to act with no feedback from society.
No positive reinforcement. No
whatsoever.
Nothing.
And I think that's like, if I actually had to put a real, like what has worked so well for me and why the input over the output focus has been so powerful, is that I can extend the time horizon basically indefinitely, because the goal is me and then the external goals occur.
You don't need the positive reinforcement. I mean, everybody's seen an...
No, I need the positive reinforcement, but the positive reinforcement is coming from me.
Internally.
I'm just being like, just because I think it's important.
The positive external reinforcement that most people are looking for.
Right. But if you are the goal, then the actions you take every day are reinforcing who you believe yourself to be. That's where the confidence comes from. And if you just want to be satisfied, then just work it off. It takes more effort to start in the beginning. And more people are right about the fact, they're like, hey, you're not going to hit it big. And guess what? A month in, you're not. But they're only measuring on months. And at 6 months, you're also not going to have hit it big yet. And they're going to be like, I'm still right. And at a year, you're still not going to have hit it big. And they'll still be right. And every day that you haven't hit it, they're going to feel like they were right. But they're wrong, because they're measuring in days and you're measuring in decades. Motivation is the equal opposite of deprivation. So we are most motivated when we are deprived of something. I'm most motivated to sleep when I'm sleep deprived. I'm most motivated to eat when I'm deprived of food. Now, that logic carries for physiological needs. But then when you get into psychological things or intangible constructs, so like, let's think about money. By that same logic, you'd think, oh, poor people should be more motivated because they're deprived of money. But that we don't see that in reality. Many poor people are not that motivated. So it would then follow, and I've seen some incredibly rich people who are wildly hungry for money. And so then it would follow that the deprivation comes from our reference point, because money is intangible. And so it's how much do we perceive our deprivation around money? And so if all of my friends are billionaires and I'm worth $100 million, then I have a $900 million deficit that I have to come up. I'm $900 million poorer than the person who just is at $5,000 a month who wants to make $10,000 a month. I'm more motivated to make money than they are because I'm more deprived of it. And so in thinking about this, I then think, okay, what am I deprived of that motivates me to go get it? And also, when I want to try and judge the behavior of others or predict their behavior, I have to think, what things are they deprived of? Because I have a much stronger predictive power than trying to say, how do I motivate this person? Look at what they lack. The reason the goal isn't coming at you fast enough is because every person you've seen accomplish the goal, you only see it the moment they accomplish it. And the reason that it hurts so much when people are like, must be nice, oh, that happened overnight, is because every time you fail, no one cares and no one sees. But when you finally win, people take notice.
Discredited.
But it's the only time they notice is when you actually win. And so to even further reinforce the point, the fact that everyone looks like an overnight success means that the 10 years where they sucked, no one saw. And so the fear that you have about people noticing the fact that you fail is ridiculous because they're barely going to notice when you succeed. Most of everyone who's listening to this who isn't achieving what they want is f***ed with their time. They think that they're spending all their time working, but your output, like you don't even know how to work. I'm being really real with you. Like you think you know how to work, you don't know how to work. Like the amount of output, like, and I'll measure this by like, what is your output? It's probably not as high as you think. And so rather than trying to learn all these productivity hacks, the ultimate productivity hack is no. N-O. Is you stop doing. And then when you create space, then you can fill it with the thing that matters. But trying to add on more to your schedule of all the things that you're not willing to sacrifice is the very reason that you're not doing what you need to do. I think the more, at least for me, the more I've tried to create space between how I feel and what I do, the more consistent my outcomes have been. So if I need to create content and I'm not feeling it, or I'm feeling tired, or things like that, the more times I give into that excuse or that feeling, then the more superstitious I become about doing it in the future. Whereas a lot of times if I can just start when I am tired or when something is painful and then still execute about the same as before, I look at game tape or I look at video or I look at the content from those sessions, for example, and I see that I remember feeling terrible during the session, but you can't really see anything. And I think the more times you get that loop going, the more you can separate how you feel and what is required. And the more times you do what is required to get what you want, the more times you get what you want. The idea that working hard doesn't make progress is one of the biggest farces that exists in humanity, because at the end of the day, whatever you amount to isn't going to matter anyways, right? And so if there is anything that's eternal for us, at least as individuals, it's going to be who we become in the process. And so one of my favorite quotes is, the work works on you more than you work on it. If you want to be the best in the world at something, you do the work to become the best in the world, and the work works on you. And so, I mean, there's a biblical proverb, I think it says like, there is profit in all labor. And that means that even if the thing that you're working on right now doesn't amount to the outcome that you expected that it would, it doesn't mean that you don't become better through doing it. And so whatever the next mountain that you're trying to climb is, of course it's going to be higher, but it's going to require you to go through the smaller mountains to get to that point. So, because the more able you are, the more able you realize you can become. And you will get way bigger outcomes from the things that you have, like the path that led you here, than you think you can. And so that's why since that moment where I lost everything, and then I was able to make more in the next 12 months, I realized that no work is wasted, because I am the output of the work, not the outcome. And that was one of the biggest frame shifts for me in never thinking that work is wasted, because the more I work, the bigger my work ethic, the more my work capacity increases. If I'm shoveling, I can choose to be like, I will be the best shit shoveler, because I believe that I will figure out how to do this more efficiently, and I will get better, and I'll have calluses on my hands, and I'll have a better back and whatever. But I will do this well. And I think you can find joy in work if you decide to do it. So if your dream causes you so much pain, then you will quit what you're doing and do it. And if it doesn't cause you enough pain that you're not pursuing it, or that you don't, like if you don't feel like you're in a cage right now, then maybe you're not in a cage. And maybe you just need to like the life you have, and that's cool too. If you're going through that right now, and I promise you, every single person who wants to do something with their life and has done something with their life has gone through the exact chapter that you're going through. And it's the lonely chapter. It's the chapter where you don't fit in with your own friends, but you don't have the outcomes yet to fit into a new group of friends. And you're doing this thing, you're consuming content on the internet, you're doing these free tutorials online to try and figure out how to set up a podcast, and where do I host this thing? And then you're going through this, and you're like, is this even worth it? Because you have no signs of success, right? But if there's anything that you can take away from what we're saying right now, is that the sign of success is the hate that you get along the way. And what you can't do is bend the knee to their hate and fit back into the conformity because it's comfortable and it's warm. Because like in the Matrix, when Trinity opens the door, when Neo's about to go take the red pill and he wants to get out of the car, she says, Neo, you've been down that road and you know exactly where it leads. And I know that's not where you want to be. And then he closes the door. Like right now, this moment that you're going through is Trinity opening the door and being like, you could go back. But then you'd have to remember exactly what the reason was that you decided not to go out to begin with, just because you listen to this podcast and you consume this content, you're like, I can do more than this. Like, because you are starting to live in some of that hell where you look in the mirror and you're like, I can do more. And you start to see the person that you could be. And you're like, this does start to feel like hell. You only start really liking stuff when you get good at it, in my opinion. And you only get good at it by doing it a lot of times before you're good at it. And so this is why I'm a big believer in this, is that when you are starting out, I think you got to find the thing that's the pain. And like, pain motivates significantly faster and stronger than pleasure does. Like, people are like, no, passion's the right way. It's like, point a gun at a family member, all of a sudden 10 out of 10 motivation, pain. And so like, I think people should use their pain more. And if they don't have enough pain, then one, maybe that's fine and you're a dreamer and that's okay. But I will tell you that a word that I read in my like 6-month journey between when I wanted to quit and when I actually quit, there was this word that just like pissed me off. And it was this in this self-help or entrepreneur book. And it said, there are entrepreneurs and there are wantrepreneurs. And it was like, wantrepreneurs are people who read these books and don't do anything. And I was just like, I don't want to be. I was like, I am one of these right now. And it just like felt so powerless. And I think that my entire life has been a lot of trying to have power. And I mean that in the true sense of just being able to direct influence in events. I've wanted to have more power to protect myself, protect the people I care about, etc. And I felt very powerless. And I think that I was in that comfortable, like my dad approves of my current situation. I had a job that when I told people, they're like, oh, that's fancy. But I felt powerless. And I hated that more than anything. And so I think if I want to say this to anyone who's listening, if there's anything you listen to, all the stuff that I described that was really tough, that I went through, was not as hard as me quitting my job. By far, the hardest decision of my entire life, bar none. Because the things that I was actually caught up with were the opinions of other people. Opinions of my father, and the opinions of the people that I went to school with who I thought would judge me for leaving this good job to probably become a failed gym owner. And how lame that would sound. Compared to consultant, going to Harvard, and blah, blah, like I was going to go from peak white collar to a very blue collar, profession making significantly less because I quote loved it. And like, I'll say this again, but like sometimes you have to let other people's dreams for your life die for yours to live. Everyone believes in the American dream until it comes true. And I remember because what had happened was everybody, when I was sleeping on the gym floor, right? Like, I was the underdog, and everyone, my clients were all like, oh, good for you. You're going after your dream. And they'd see my blanket and my pillow in the corner of the gym, and they knew I was sleeping there. And it was evident, I lived there. I didn't have a shower. I didn't have a shower to go to the YMCA to go shower. And that everybody was like pro me. And then people would come in, they sign up like, I'm gonna support you, right? And then within 9 months, I had hired people and I had a manager, and I pulled up, and I remember I walked in the lobby, and all the same people were like, boss man's here. Oh, you're not too good for us now, right? And I remember being so jarred by the experience, and I was like, you guys rooted for me. And I was like, and now I did what you said you were rooting for me to do. And that was when I realized that people want you to do well, but not better than them. And I was like, I had gone from underdog to the man. And I was like, when does that happen? And the litmus test of when it happens is depends on who the person is. Because for the person who was working at my gym, who, was a janitor or a cleaner, it happened really quick, right? For the people who were more successful, it took longer. And then, the only people at the end who would still root for me were the business owners who were doing way better than me, right? Who were still members of my gym. And so that was a really interesting experience that happened when I was 23. And that was the first time I went from underdog to the person that someone would want to attack. But I had a performance coach tell me this. He said, hatred isn't something you avoid. He said, it is a requisite for success. He said, if you get no hate, you are not successful. And for some reason, that just like really stuck with me, because then it just like, rather than it being this thing that I was trying to avoid, it actually became a leading indicator, or an indicator that I was on the right path in achieving things. Everyone's like, they want this magic pill. They want to know the secret, but there is no secret. It's just hard work. But I think the thing that everyone who's listening lacks is the context on how hard work is, not in that it's complex, but just in that it's a continuous and unending focus on one thing and noticing the details that separate mediocrity from greatness. And if you're like, I don't know what the difference between those two things is, that is the opportunity that hard work reveals, is that it takes watching 10 hours of you presenting and then taking notes at every time that you say or that a transition between slides is unclean, or that the audience kind of gets lost there because I can see that there's no reactions to that. I should probably add a visual there. And then when you go slide by slide, realizing that, okay, I can put 1,000 slides together for 90 minutes of presenting if I really put one thought with one visual per slide. And every one of them, and I love this description, is like a coat of paint. It's like you just put another coat of paint on the skill set or the achievement that you're working towards. And most people expect that the pencil wireframe that they do on their first shot is hard work because that's the hardest they've worked, not the amount of hard work that is required in order to get the level of outcome that they say they want or that they expect. And so there's a
divorce in reality because they don't have the context from which to make a judgment, because they've never been great at anything. And until you get great, because as soon as you get great at one thing, you realize just the tremendous amount of hours and work that it takes to be great at one thing. And then there's this moment that I can express personally, which is you realize that there's so few things that you can be great at. And then the discipline comes down to saying, what are the 2 or 3 things that I can be really good at in my life?
I think most people feel really lonely when you want something that doesn't currently exist. And so some people call that dreams, some people call that goals, whatever it is. You're trying to pull something from your mind into reality, and you want it done a certain way. And if it's not done that way, it's not what you imagined. And so people on the outside will throw stones and call you names that they think will change your behavior and get you to stop. And the more I have been the person trying to pull things into reality, the more I've tried to weather and build kind of defenses against those things, so that when those stones get hurled at you by being called a control freak, or by saying you micromanage things, or that you have incredibly high standards, the answer is yes, because I want it done right the first time.
It's rarely the information or the intensity that makes things hard. It's the sticking with it that makes it hard. And so the desire that we have to quit is simply breaking the consistency. And so that's why consistency has always been the hardest thing for most people to achieve. But the intensity of what you have to do to be successful is much lower than most people expect. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes they suffer significantly more in a short period of time than is required to be successful over a much longer period of time with a much lower intensity.